Presidency says it does not view the latest U.S. travel alert for South Africa as a cause of concern. This follows a travel advisory issued by the U.S. government last week, placing South Africa under a level 2 alert just days after President Cyril Ramaphosa's visit to the White House. Meanwhile, a new travel restriction announced by the U.S. President Donald Trump is set to take effect today. The order targets citizens from 12 countries, including Afghanistan, Iran, Libya and Somalia, with a full entry ban. While the measure is being justified as a national security precaution, it has sparked criticism from human rights groups and foreign governments who argue that it is discriminatory. Joining us now to unpack the implications of this travel ban is Dr. Oscar van Heerden, a senior research fellow at the Center for African Diplomacy and Leadership at the University of Johannesburg. A very good morning to you, Dr. van Heerden. Thank you so much for making time for us this morning. Let's start off with the travel alert. It's not the first time that there has been a travel alert, especially a level 2 travel alert. But what do you make of this one, specifically coming after that meeting between President Cyril Ramaphosa and Donald Trump?
Yeah, as far as, thanks, Albert. As far as the level 2 restriction is concerned, I tend to agree with President Ramaphosa and his administration, which is that I don't think there's anything to be concerned about. If and when it does happen, should it happen, that's when the country will engage with that particular issue. But for now, it's just a list. As for the other African countries, I mean, I think there's a few things that needs to be taken. I mean, the knee-jerk reaction would be that this is discriminatory, this is racist. We know that President Trump, for example, used expletives in his first term, referring to some African countries and so forth. So we know what his attitude is towards the continent. However, I do think that there's a few factors that must be taken into consideration. I do think that Marco Rubio's State Department, together with Homeland Security, together with the CIA, they all would have had an input into this travel ban. And I do think that those countries, particularly the ones from the continent in Africa, needs to do some introspection to look at, are there some validity behind these claims of exporting of terrorism, extremism, and so forth, and do they indeed pose a threat? I think that's the first thing, just like South Africa did when there were these falsehoods and lies about white genocide and so forth. So if you wanted to repair the relations going forward, I do think that the 7 countries on the continent will have to do some introspection. That's the first thing. And I think the second thing is that we know that Donald Trump is a disruptor. He wants to put you on the back foot in order to be able to negotiate with you on favorable terms. And this could be one of those where, you know, certain countries have been identified, put them on the back foot with the travel ban and see when they come begging how to negotiate around certain things. So that this could also be one of the things.
Yeah. What then do you make of the response from the African Union Commission? I just quickly want to read from it. It says that while recognizing the sovereign right of all nations to protect their borders and to ensure the security of their citizens, the African Union Commission respectfully appeals to the United States to exercise this right in a manner that is balanced, evidence-based, and reflective of a long-standing partnership between the United States and Africa. Is this based on the assumption that it could not be evidence-based? Because we know that Donald Trump has previously signed off on executive orders that are not evidence-based, and South Africa is a case in point with the so-called white genocide.
No, absolutely. I mean, the truth is that the African Union is saying, can you please share with us what are this evidence that you are using to come up with this travel ban? But in reality, the United States doesn't have to provide any evidence. It is up to the administration. What's open to some countries, as for the Vienna Convention, is to reciprocate. Chad has done so already. We see Chad has also enforced travel bans for all Americans to that country. It's not necessarily the way to go, I would argue, if you want to repair relations. But there are times when reciprocity is required. I remember a few years ago when certain visa restrictions were placed on countries all over the world. And countries like Brazil, for example, immediately reciprocated and said to the Americans, if you are going to require us to have visas, then your people must also have visas to come to Brazil. And of course, Brazil is a big country, and a lot of tourists and a lot of people from America come to Brazil. But those are options that are open to countries. But it's, as I say, it's not necessarily the right move.
Yeah, and all of this also happening, of course, with the geopolitics currently unfolding. But I want to know what it means then for trade specifically between the United States as well as when we just focusing on African states right now, because it is African states, it is the Middle East that is affected, and I think with the Caribbean islands as well. No Europeans, so meaning that the threat that has been identified could be coming from these countries. You know about the incident that happened in Colorado, as an example. That individual is from Egypt, Egypt not being on the list as well. But as we understand that these discussions would have happened way before even this incident would have taken place in Colorado. But it just, for me, what it has left me with is that does it mean that the threat could only be coming from these particular nations? But what the Colorado incident is telling us that actually terrorism could come from wherever.
No, absolutely. I mean, and this is why I think the AU is saying, please share with us the evidence and so on. There is a number of the countries, almost all of the countries is Muslim countries. So there's an element of potentially Islamophobia, trying to associate Islam with terrorism and so forth. These are all factors that need to be taken into consideration. It is 7 of 54 countries on the continent. I do think we must put it into perspective in terms of the rest of the continent. But as I say, there could be a plethora of reasons why Trump has decided that this ban must come into effect, specifically with these countries. We know, for example, Yemen is engaged in certain tensions and conflicts with the state of Israel and also disrupting the ships and sea routes in that part of the world. So there could be a host of reasons. The Taliban is back in control in Afghanistan and so on and so forth. Yeah. But the truth of the matter is that I think we are seeing an administration that we know is right-wing, that is conservative, that has very little regard for Africa as for their president, Donald Trump. And we need to engage these issues from that departure point. And also ask the question, you know, one of the geostrategic and geopolitical issues is that this is just going to further push certain African countries further far east to China, because they don't have these travel bans with the second largest economy in the world.
Yeah, and just finally, I guess it comes as no surprise how Iran has responded to this. Iran saying that it condemns the racist mentality behind the U.S. Travel ban. What does this all mean for the Red Sea?
No, I don't think it's going to have an immediate implication. I think people are upset. Remember, Alder, there's also sporting events that are being disrupted now. We know, for example, that the United States are hosting the FIFA World Cup next year, as well as the Olympics in 2028. What does that say about supporters of these countries? Iran has already qualified for the FIFA World Cup. Does it mean that Iranians are not going to be allowed to come and support their team, and so on and so forth? So
and that's the interesting. Sorry, Dr. van Heerden, and I think that's the interesting thing, right? Is that you're saying that the ban would not affect the athletes themselves, but we know sporting is also about the fans.
Absolutely. I mean, it's about, you know, it's income generation, and perhaps the United States doesn't need it because it's the #1, economy in the world. But the truth of the matter is that these sporting events is about the gees, it's about the people that come from all over the world supporting their teams and also being exposed to your country and so on. It's certainly the reason why other countries are doing it, to try and get tourism and support to come in. So there's going to be that implication as well. Clearly, the peoples of these countries are not going to be allowed to come to these sporting events.
Do you foresee any legal challenges to this executive order?
I don't think so. I don't think so. You know, to go up against the United States, I think that certain multilateral fora, there will be concerns, potentially petitions, but as to legally challenging it, I don't think you're going to get anywhere with the Trump administration.
All right. Thank you so much for making time for us. Dr. Oscar van Heerden there, Diplomacy and Leadership